Welcome to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, the podcast by filmmakers for filmmakers. My name is Andrew, and I'm joined alongside my co-host Jeff, as always. Jeff and I are writers and directors and passionate about the art of storytelling. Filmmaker Mixer is a creative hub where aspiring and established filmmakers come together to share experiences, insights, strategies, and inspiration.
Hello, everybody. This is the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, and today we are chatting with Curtis Green, the composer of Daniel Dae Kim's new spy thriller series, Butterfly. So, Curtis, welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to chat with you. It's a great show, and I want to get into that and how you do what you do. But first, I want to find out a little bit more about you and your background. How did you get interested in composing for film and storytelling? Did that happen at a young age? Were you into music as a kid and just said, "I'm going to be a film composer"?
It happened pretty instantly when I
Really?
saw and heard The Phantom Menace in 1999 and just blew me away. And then I went back and with my uncle, who's also a musician, and he showed me the original trilogy. And he was able to do this magical thing when my brother and I, at a young age, we would play with lightsabers, and he would sit at this piano, actually, which was shipped out to Los Angeles from New York. He would sit and he would look at us and he would kind of play along as we were fighting and kind of accent, when we hit swords, and I would like look at him and stop playing and go, what? How is he doing that same thing that they do in the movies? And he told me about John Williams, and he kind of started explaining, oh, that this is, the music is a part of filmmaking, and it's a thing that they do, and they record these things called orchestras. And from that point, really, I was just kind of emotionally hooked. It didn't become a career idea until I met Michael Giacchino in my late teens, who was a family friend. And he invited me out to California, and I went to my first real recording session, which was Star Trek Into Darkness, and
Oh,
that just
wow.
blew me away. I was speechless for days after that, just hearing the most amazing LA musicians in at the Fox stage. And so yeah, it was really this emotional beginning, kind of falling in love with moving image plus music, and then later on figuring out, oh, this is actually something that I could do. I think I was 16 or
Wow. That
17.
must have been
Yeah.
amazing.
Oh, it changed my life. It changed my life. I just from that moment on, it went from being fantasy to reality. Because living in New York, I didn't know anybody who was in film music. I didn't know anybody who was really in movies. I mean, my parents had been in the entertainment business a little bit, but more so on the side of dance. And then my dad went to Broadway, and that's why they moved to New York, and that's where I grew up. But meeting Michael was just this total turning point of setting my life in a completely opposite direction from wherever I thought I was going, and I had no real idea. But seeing that this was like a tactile process with people filling different roles, and the musicians and the conductor and the people printing out the music and the people in the recording booth and the producers and the director, like it was just this unbelievable eye-opening trip. And we did one day at Fox, and then I must have said, "Oh, can I go back? Are you doing it again tomorrow?" And I did, and I think I ended up skipping school for like a week just to be out in Los Angeles. And then that kind of also solidified my love of LA. And I just set my sights on being out here, and now I'm here, and I love it.
So what was the process to actually turn it into a career then? What you fell in love with it, you knew you wanted to do it. What steps did you take that actually made it a reality for you?
I think the first was, and with the help of my parents who had been in the entertainment industry and knowing this maxim of, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so every other opportunity that I had to come out to LA after that and just be on a fly on the wall with Michael, whether it was getting coffee or, managing scorebooks or different things like that. So that was priority number one, was to just spend as much time around him as I could. And then after that, I just watched a lot of movies because that was something he mentioned to me. He was like, if you want to write music for movies, you got to know movies. And so then I think later that summer, I actually took a filmmaking course, and I would not want to go back and watch those short movies that I made. I think they were very angsty and very poetic and slow, and but it gave me a respect for the people behind the camera and that process. Because what we composers deal with is mostly working with something that has already, so many things have already happened by the time we arrive at receiving a cut or a rough cut. Um, so yeah, learning filmmaking was big, and then just learning music. I ended up going to USC and studying composition and music theory and orchestration and conducting, and that kind of really gave me more of a foundation of the chops. And I studied with a great composer there named Vince Mendoza, who's like won a million Grammys and did the Joni Mitchell Both Sides Now orchestra record. And he was just a huge, huge influence on me. And so, yeah, I think I've just tried my best to find mentors, find people who really seem like they know what they're doing. And oftentimes they do. And if you hang out with people like that for long enough, you kind of pick some things up along the way. Um,
So what was that first short film you did? What was that called?
the first, I don't even think it had a name, the one that I made and directed myself, but it was this guy, he was running and like always running to catch a door that was closing. And as soon as he got through the door, he would see another door that was closing. And then by the time the short ends, it's just like a minute, he sees that the door that he initially ran from is, just about to close and he's trying to catch it. So it was, I guess at the time I thought it was this allegory for life or something.
So it sounds like one of those stress dreams. I have this recurring
Yes.
dream where I'm late for the airport or something. It's one of those dreams.
Yes, exactly. For me, it's being on a stage, holding an instrument that I've never learned before, like the violin, and yeah, seeing that the piano bench is taken, which is my usual spot, and then saying, "Ah, yeah, I don't know how to play violin." Yeah, so we all have those. Yeah, but then my
Well,
first short film that I scored was kind of right after that first visit to LA. I came home and a friend of mine serendipitously reached out and said, "Hey, I just shot this movie over spring break, and do you know how to do this? Do you know how to put music, to a movie?" And I was like, "Oh my God, this is perfect. This is exactly what I, was sort of crying out to the universe, asking for." And then I did that, and that was a huge learning experience, and just kept kind of doing shorts along the way. I mean, you can learn a ton by studying, like I said, orchestration and composition, but really I feel like the most I've ever learned in my career was just doing things. And case in point, Butterfly, the composer I was before starting this show to now, I just feel like there's been so many things technically and from just a more bird's eye point of view in terms of storytelling. Like I couldn't have asked for better collaborators and teachers, and I think we're all kind of teaching each other something, on the road to making something. So yeah, it was just an amazing experience.
well, how did you get involved with Butterfly?
Michael Giacchino got a call from his longtime friend Daniel Dae Kim, who they knew each other from back in the Lost days. And Daniel was looking for a young composer to do this new show that he had coming out on Amazon. And Michael recommended me and Minhee, another composer, and we worked together. And it initially was very like, we read the first two episode scripts and got like kind of a rough idea of the style and tone, but then it was a little bit of just waiting for a couple months. They did some reshoots, and then when they all kind of got back to LA, we really dove in. And Daniel, he started the whole process as one of the executive producers. He sent us these two videos of Korean musicians, and it was one was like a traditional Jangu, ensemble, and then the other one was this weird like piano trio. It was like piano, violin, and cello. And he basically was saying like, there's something here stylistically that I'm responding to. And that gave us the idea of what if we did something really organic? So many great, amazing spy scores have really relied heavily on electronics, which is it's amazing and cool. But being that there are so many musicians, so many musical instruments in Korean folk music that have these unbelievably unique textures. Case in point, the kwangwari that we used, which is kind of all over the main theme, is this really sharp percussive instrument. And then there's like a couple other instruments that we used, a little bit from the sort of more Chinese area and the more Japanese area. But that whole array of musical instruments is just so fascinating. So I dove in a lot to that, and we ended up creating these like pulses and these rhythmic textures, these like overflowing, overlaying different, that kind of thing. And it became this really nice organic energy that then we played it for Daniel in one of our initial meetings, and he really responded to it in that same way of like the organic element, because I think it's such a human story. It's really family first, spy second, in my opinion, which I think makes it super, super beautiful. But yeah, we wanted something that felt like this emotional heart of the show. And I think, yeah, those initial kind of like the way that he steered us initially was really, really cool. And it ended up being very fruitful.
Well, one of the things when we talk to writers, we often ask is, are you plot first or character first? Everybody has a different way into a story. So I'm curious with you, your way into a composition, you were talking about, using these different instruments and trying to find the tone and mood. Are you trying to find the texture and the mood first, or are you trying to find the actual thematic scores first? Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think for me, it always starts with just sitting down and like clearing my head. Especially right after I watch like a rough cut or even just like a little scene. Like the first clip that I ever saw from the show was when David sort of steps out from behind this boat in this, at his farm, and he reveals himself and to Rebecca, his daughter, for the first time in many years, and she says, "Oh my God, Dad!" And for that to be the first scene that I saw of anything, of any footage, really anchored me, I think, emotionally. And so after that, I sat down at the piano and I came up with like a rough version of what ended up being this father-daughter theme, this very like emotional theme. But it's not always that. I think simultaneously to creating the sort of chordal, emotional, harmonic DNA of the show, I was also doing all this research and experimenting with these like rhythmic patterns. And because I think we also wanted to convey this is a show where there's a lot of stories and secrets overlaid on one another. And you can do that so many ways musically, but I think we felt this idea of being a spy, stepping in and out of the darkness, as in that scene Daniel does, where he's sort of stepping out literally and metaphorically into the light, back into Rebecca's life. So yeah, it's both things, but it starts with kind of trying to quiet my mind, see if there's anything that I can sort of like hear. Sometimes I feel like I watch something and then I press pause and it could be an instrument, it could be a texture, it could be a rhythm, it could be some harmonies. But if I just like take 10, 15 minutes to listen and kind of wait, sometimes there's something there. And then you sort of catch it and go, oh, okay, what was that? Where's that going? And for me, I just try to kind of find where it's leading me, which all comes out of the picture itself.
So I'm curious about something else. When you're working on the score initially, I'm assuming you're on piano. Is that how you're figuring out? Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you decide? You're coming up with a theme or a score or a piece of music on the piano, and then when you're designing it for another instrument, is there like experimentation? Like, I think this theme would be great with cello, say, and then you
Mhm.
hear the cello and you go, well, maybe we should switch over to something else. Is that kind of the process? How does it work when you're figuring out the actual instruments you want to use?
Yeah, a little bit. I think over time, you kind of develop an inner ear for what a cello would sound like.
So
And
you're
for me,
you're, you're hearing it in your head already as you're
yeah, totally.
gotcha.
Even when I play the piano, if I'm picturing cellos, I'll be sort of like, it's more of like an emotional thought, if that makes sense, in this way of like the tone of every instrument has its own emotional quality. I mean, like bassoon, you think of sort of old 1940s mystery uh, movies and kind of more wacky stuff. And then you think of cello and violin, you think like romance and something really heartfelt. And so it's almost like not even about the instrument itself. It's about what the effect of the instrument is. And so if I'm there's a great scene in episode one uh, where, or it's actually at the beginning of episode two, where David is at a train station and he's like staring at this train that he's supposed to get on, and he decides ultimately not to get on the train, and he's thinking about his daughter. He's flashing back to having seen her, and that was a moment where cello, the just the nature of that being such like a low, rich, deep instrument, it just felt a lot like, I'm not a father myself, but it felt like a lot what I imagined fatherhood to be, and having a love for a child, and so in that moment, it's just kind of like, oh, what if we had cello, and then you try it with these amazing soft synths and VSTs that we have, and you go, okay, that's pretty good, and then when you hear it with the live orchestra, it blows you away, and yeah, so there was a lot of that, a lot of just like, okay, what is this moment? What does it need texturally, emotionally, and then just responding to it in that sense. But convenience wise, it's just me at the piano plunking things out and seeing what sounds good. Yeah.
Well, you talk about working with live musicians. Does the does the music change at all when you start to work with live musicians? Does a musician um, just do what's on the page, or do they bring a little language to it that makes you change something? Does that ever happen?
Yeah. So many times. I think often that's the way it should be. The best moments are when you bring a piece of music to a musician. And I think it's our duty as composers to bring something that is pretty fleshed out. Like you don't want to put a musician on the spot and say, I have this vague idea. Can you make it really beautiful? But coming to them with something that you think is totally done, and then they put a spin on it that you go, oh my gosh, wait, it makes me want to totally redo it. What if instead of this you did that? And then that's just the beauty of working with humans, I think, in any medium, is that we all bring something to the table. And I think the best composers that I've seen, Michael being one of them, are really open and really confident in themselves and able to take to sort of look to observe and then receive the feedback that the world is giving you from the music that you've made. So yeah, we had several moments on this show bringing the music to Budapest. We didn't go ourselves, but we had a great group over there, and they just played their butts off. And there were so many times where you think something is going to sound a certain way, and then they do something different, or they make a mistake. I mean, that's the best is when a mistake, and they say, "Oh, sorry, that should have been this," and you go, "No, no, no, that was great. That actually, when you messed up that note, it creates a lot more tension. So can you guys play that instead of what I wrote?" And it's just countless moments like that. But that's what I love about the process, of working with live musicians when we get a chance.
Well, are there any unique challenges, or is it a different way into the soundtrack when you're doing, say, a spy thriller like this versus an animated show?
Yeah, I mean, I think in animation, everything, it's a lot more, I don't want to say controlled, but I think the process is more one of like refinement, speaking as not as an animator, but on the shows that I've been a part of, it's really just like sort of chipping at marble, of having this idea, having the storyboards and the animatics, and then getting to, final light and sound, um, compared to live action when sometimes, you have an impression of what you've gotten from a shoot, and then you look at the dailies and it's totally different. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a way where you got to go back and reshoot things. But I think you're similar to working with humans and musicians, you're working with something that is unpredictable. It's never going to be the same thing twice. Um, and so I think the way that that affects the music is that in animation, you're also creating this world. Everything in animation has not existed prior to its creation. The sound and color and everything. Um, but when you're working with and seeing humans, I think we have certain expectations, or the audience does at least, and I think that's the biggest difference is stylistically there's an expectation when you're working in animation, but also the music is, I think you're able to do things that are a little bit more fantastical, or kind of out of this world because you're not in this world. You're sort of creating another world. Whereas when you're working with humans and you're working with live action and spy thriller, having a genre that's, can be very prescriptive is its own thing. But when you're working with humans, I just think the audience has different expectations about what's possible musically and how kind of like I think animation is a lot more sort of like musical theater in a sense that there's a lot of suspended belief, that a character can break into song, or that be, music underscoring dialogue in a way that you wouldn't have, where I think you have to be maybe a little bit more subtle when it comes to live action and how you kind of get in and out of a scene and how dramatic you can get. You can get very, very melodramatic with animation, I think, which works really well. And then when it comes to spy thrillers, I mean, I've loved spy capers, just forever. The original James Bond and the newer James Bond. And there's definitely like uh, you feel that the weight of all the great spy scores that have come before, and we definitely wanted to do something, try to do something new. You try to do something new, it doesn't always come out that way, but I think we succeeded in giving the show like a real flavor, a real sort of distinct tone. And that was just so much fun.
Do you have any examples of a project where you were motivated to say go against type for the score? There was a moment in a scene where the obvious choice would have been A, but you
Mhm.
thought, what if we just do the opposite and do Z, for example? And if
Yeah.
so, what would have motivated that decision, do you think?
There's actually a great example of this late in Butterfly at the end of episode 5. Um, Actually, at the beginning of episode 6, David is chasing down this car, and Rebecca has been abducted. And there were two ways to go with it. The first way would have been just to play up the action, just to play up the intensity of, oh no, she's getting away, and the desperation. But then there was this second layer that we found after a couple passes of going through it of really centering in on his emotion. So even though there's like these pulsing drums and this energy, the strings in that moment are actually doing something very kind of like long and melodic. And we really wanted it to touch at his heart in that moment of like, I don't want to let her get away another time. That would be just even more devastating. And so he's as he's chasing after her, he's imagining what it would be like to lose her again. And it's something that he said over and over throughout the show. And could it have worked just playing to the action and just hitting those beats? And, he's got this epic ride on the motorcycle. Yeah, probably. But I think we were able to flip it on its head a little bit and go for something maybe unexpected in terms of how emotional that moment is.
Interesting. Interesting. Well, Curtis, before we wrap up, for people who want to follow your career and see what you're up to next, do you have a social media presence?
I
Can people
do.
hear about things you're working on?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Curtis Green Music. My Spotify and Apple Music is Curtis Green. You can listen to the soundtrack from Butterfly, as well as some Disney projects that I've done, Doug Days and Zootopia Plus. And I've got some exciting things coming up that I can't share at the moment. But as soon as I can, I will let you know.
Yeah, you'll have to circle back and we'll chat some more.
Yeah, that sounds great.
All right, man. Well, you take care. Don't hang up. I want to chat with you just for a couple minutes, but
You as well.
enjoy the conversation. It was fun.
Thanks, man. Yeah, this was great.
All right, you take care, man.
Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker Mixer podcast, a podcast created and hosted by filmmakers Jeff Stolen and Andrew Lamping, and produced by Melody Lopez.
Our theme song was composed by Stephen D. Bennett.
Make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us on, and stay tuned for future episodes.